Morning, Ridgepoint. Go ahead and stay standing up for a minute if you would. Hey, can we, a little bit of a quick audible, can we put parts of the lyrics of that song back on the screen for 1 minute? Filled with wonder, awestruck wonder at the mention of your name. Is it possible to quickly find that? Sorry, Dan, I'm going to throw you real quick here. Put that back up. And here's why. We're in a series right now called Rooted. We're in the second week of it. And in a lot of ways, Rooted is a 10-week journey through the basics of what we believe as followers of Jesus. And if you're new to that journey, you're going to have maybe one perspective. It's a perspective of learning and understanding and maybe even challenging you. Why this? Why not that? If you've been walking with Jesus for any length of time, it's a little bit more of a revisit of some of the basics maybe in some regard of what it is that we believe and why we believe it and why they're so significant. If you're of the latter, it would be very easy to just almost dismiss some of it because, I know that. God created all things. In the beginning was the heavens and the earth was formless, and with that, and I know these things. And he died on the cross, and yet, I was thinking this morning as we're singing these lines, filled with wonder, awestruck wonder, at just the what? Mention of his name. There should be no point as a follower of Jesus where it becomes commonplace. What becomes commonplace? Anything about him. Who he is, what he's done for you and me. So much so that even the familiarity of his name should constantly bring a sense of awe and wonder when we just hear Jesus, let alone the reminder of the great things that he's done, whether they are new to you or whether they are familiar to you for decades long. Matter of fact, in one place in the Bible, just stay up with me for one more minute. On your screen, the Apostle Paul once wrote this to the church. And in this is so much to us about not just the series, but I think the significance of even its name, Rooted. He says, so then, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord, so just as, so he's saying it's already happened, but then he says this, continue. So just as, continue to live your lives in him. And this is the phrase. Well, the phrase is rooted and established and built up in him. Is that, Paul says to the church, just as you did receive him, so continue to do the work. So in other words, the things that led you into relationship with him to begin with, the early things, the basic things, the foundational things, he says, continue in them. Don't give up on your awareness of them. Don't give up on continuing to explore them. There's no end to their depth. There's no end to their mystery. And the stronger your roots grow spiritually, the stronger your tree becomes. And it's the same thing physically. We know this. It cost me about $10,000 or $15,000 to learn it years ago in my own house when we had a giant silver maple that was buckling up my whole driveway, literally the root system pushing up thousands of pounds worth of cement, inches above the cement floor in my garage. Matter of fact, when we finally pull up the slab, here's the pictures of the roots. Yeah, that was just one small section of root. Here's another picture, a little bit better angle. Yeah, completely shoving up all of the cement, like thousands of pounds, just jacking it all up, ruined my whole septic system and everything. $15,000 later, I was taught a valuable lesson that the stronger and deeper your roots are, the stronger the tree is. That's when I also learned, and some of you already know this, that your roots can be anywhere from 2 to 3 times in length what the tree is in height. This is true for us as much as it is a silver maple. Is that the stronger your roots, the foundation of what it means to be a follower of Jesus and why we believe those things is so significant to not just once and done understand it, but to revisit it and to revisit it and to revisit it and let those roots, the foundation, continue to grow in their depth of understanding and grasping how great our God is so that even just the mention of his name would never grow weary on us and would never grow small in its impact. Let me pray. Go ahead and take a seat. Jesus, thank you so much for the chance to be in your presence, which I really believe we are. We're not just in each other's presence. We're not just here in the presence of bands and people and friends and family. We believe this, in the presence of you, the God Almighty. And so, God, would you just do your good, kind, gracious work? to speak to us this morning. Believing and knowing that we are all in a different place in what we even understand about you. If there is a you, is you, Jesus, and all of the mix of in between of where we find ourselves today. Some of us right now, God, are even watching online because we're not ready to walk in the doors of a church. And so we're just trying to explore it from a distance. And some of us are here and we come every single week, but there's something that's grown maybe numb within us to you, to your plans for us. And so God, would you just do your good, great work of bringing truth to our minds, bringing vibrancy to our hearts, and bringing an encounter with you this morning that only you can create. It can't be manufactured by anyone else, but that you can create by being present to us. And so God, we're going to look this morning, you know this, into your scriptures at a very real moment that happened at a very real time with you and Moses that we, probably a lot of us are super familiar with. And so would you, Holy Spirit, bring in a layer of understanding of the importance of why we have this story for our reading all these many thousands of years later still, and what it tells us not just about you and Moses, but about us and you. Pray these things in your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, if you're a regular at Ridgepoint, you know this. We're going to take a second. We're going to take up our offering. And just want to say thank you, as always, each and every week when we have these moments. Say this to you all the time. This is not the most important thing that we do by any means, but it is an important thing that we do as a church, is that we give our time and we give our talents and we give our treasures over to the King to say, hey, use these, Jesus, to advance your mission in your kingdom. And I'm proud to say that in your generosity and in the labor of our community and all of our churches, he is doing that good work. So as these go around, just know if you're visiting, if you're new to Ridgepoint, especially new to church, not trying to get anything from you this morning, really just want you to take from us. What I would ask is if you're new, we'd love to just know it and be able to follow up with you if you want us to. On the back of most of the chairs in here is a little disc. Hold your phone by that. That'll bring up a small website that you can go to and just call it the Digital Hub. That's where you can learn a little bit more about who we are. And like I said, if you want to engage with us beyond Sunday, that's a great first step to take to do it. So again, if you're new, glad you're here. Thanks for being here. Those of you that give, want to just say again, thank you for giving. So this morning, this is week 2 of the series we're in called Rooted, 10 weeks long, going to run us right up into Easter. And this is the first official week of kind of following the content. So the way this whole series is going to go is those of you that are either doing the study on your own or you're doing it in a small group, is that you will do the content study on the topic of Sunday prior to Sunday. So I'm kind of hopefully the icing on the cake. This is where we're going to put the bow on what we've already been looking at this last week in our groups, which is who is God? And then this morning, we'll kind of wrap it up with a little bit of a different look on kind of the last week of content, if you will. And then we'll start over and do the same again next week. We'll do the content and then end with the same idea of that content on the weekend. This one in particular is not lost on me, the task. Very unique to the rest of the weeks, in my opinion. Because a lot of the rest of the weeks, we're going to look at things that God did, things that God instructs of us. Today is who is God, which is a big subject. And I felt the weight of that all week long. So just for what it's worth, I'm just going to tell you, as I came into even this week, I'm like, man, it just like hit me in a different way. How in the world does a human being stand on any stage in front of a room full of other human beings and say, this is who God is? Because I'm still trying to figure him out too. In all of my years that I've walked with him, I still have so little that I know about him compared to what there is to know. I'm still learning as well. I'm still growing as well. And frankly, some of what I believe about God can't be right. There's just got to be something that I've gotten wrong. One of my favorite quotes of all times is from a guy named Leonard Sweet, who once said, I'm pretty sure 20% of my theology is wrong. I just don't know what 20%. And I love the humility in that for Leonard Sweet to realize, even as a theologian, like I've got my convictions, I've got my beliefs, I can't be right about everything. Same's true for me. And if he's a theologian, I don't know, maybe I'm like 25, 30%. Somewhere in what I believe, I can't be entirely right. And so when I come to a week like this and it's, hey, here's who God is a pretty massive task. And it's a little overwhelming to try and think, how does one human being speak to other human beings with authority and clarity about who God is? And so what I want to do is I want to go right back to where God began to make one of his first, not just clearest, because there's already, prior to this moment, there's been clarity that there is a God, Elohim. But where he personalizes it from this generic Elohim, God, to something far more personal and present to us as people. And it's early on in the pages of the Bible, in the book of Exodus, which is the second book. So if you got your Bibles, go ahead and grab them, open them up. We're going to be in Exodus for the rest of the morning. The third chapter, we're going to bounce a little bit back to the second, but we're going to start right now in chapter 3. And this is what we read. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock out to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire with a bush. And Moses saw that the bush was on fire but did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see what this strange sight is and why the bush does not burn up. And when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses responded, say it. What did he say? Here I am. He just responds. Now, I think when you think about the method in which God presents himself to Moses here, it's not just to Moses. This is going to be a revelation to all of humanity about the personableness of God, that he's not just the distant creator, but he's actually a personal companion. But it's interesting to me that he picks an element of nature that is in many regards as intimidating as it is attractive: fire and flame. And that's what he's going to use to draw the attention of Moses and begin to communicate a more personal level of who he is to humanity. Now, what's interesting to me as I think about even the reality of God sharing himself through fire is that I think back to my own life, and probably some of you can think of this as well, is there are times in my life where some of my most important lessons have been learned as a result of fire. Like, do not get too close to the fire. No, you can't push your brother into the fire. You know, important lessons that you learn when you're growing up. And some that I've even learned more closely to being an adult, or a full-on adult, I guess. But 2015, I'll back up even a little bit from there. When my wife and I moved into the house that we were in before we moved over here to the west side of the state, I'll never forget, first day we saw it, we walked in, fell in love with the house right away, walked into the backyard, this beautiful, giant, silver maple, gorgeous tree, and my kids looked right at it, as did my wife, and everybody within minutes of being in this place go, that's a treehouse tree. We're like, sure is. I'm going to build a treehouse there. So we move in. You know how it goes. We move in, we get packed in, we get settled. The year goes, 2 year goes, 3 year goes, and our kids start to grow up. No treehouse. And I'll never forget one day I hear my son say to a friend of his, they're in the backyard hanging out, I'm in the backyard, and he points up at the tree and he goes, yeah, my dad said he was going to build a treehouse. I don't think he ever will. I was like, oh. They go, game on, dude. Because if I don't build a treehouse, this is a therapy bill one day. So we're building a treehouse. So that night, I will never forget, that was a Saturday. I wasn't preaching the next morning at church, so I'm like, we're going to Home Depot. My wife goes, babe, they're almost closed. I'm like, they're not closed yet. So we go to Home Depot. I figured out really quickly how much lumber I needed to put in a foundation, to put in the base. We go there, we buy, so we get the whole thing set up just like a floor that fall. Then winter, I remember, came a little bit early that year, so all we got in was the floor. We picked the job back up in the spring. My son and I did the whole thing. I had friends that were like, hey, we want to come help, I'm like, no, we got it, we're good. But that spring, we get back out there, tools and tool belts and everything, and I'll show you a picture real quick. So this is what we finally finished in the spring of 15. So, yeah, it was a super cool treehouse. Here's what the treehouse has to do with anything. You can even keep it up for a minute for context of this next story. So that same spring, we finished the treehouse, and now it's spring cleanup season. So that tree, along with every other tree in our neighborhood, we would get like 80 to 100 bags of leaves every year in the fall. So you can imagine how many trees are around, which yields not just leaves, but a lot of twigs and sticks and branches. And so there's a certain day every year where we would just all collaborate, the whole family, into the backyard, and it was an entire weekend of cleaning up. Mowing the lawn for the first time, picking up the sticks, leaves we didn't get last fall, the whole thing. This was that day. So we're cleaning everything up, and I'm mowing the lawn for the first time, and I ran out of gas, run to the garage, cans empty, darn it, run to the gas station down the street, fill it up, come back, back in the lawnmower, back on task. While I'm doing that, the kids are dumping leaves that we didn't get to during the fall into the fire pit and burning them. So we've got me cutting the lawn, there's sticks, there's leaves, we've got a big fire going. And at one point, the fire died down. Because then we're watching it and leaves burn out really quickly. And so I'm like, dang it, we got to stoke that fire. We got a fire. So I go over there and I'm trying to get it going. And they're a little bit wet, spring. So I'm like, this is not burning quick enough. So I'm like, I just got gas. You guys see where this is going, right? So I go get the gas can and I come back over to the fire and I'm like, yeah, it looks out to me. And I start to dump it. And I kid you not, as gas begins to leave the nozzle, I see one tiny little flame down there. I'm like, oop. And sure enough, it was like that. It goes, I mean, that flame shot straight up. It hit I don't even think the gas hit. I think it was all fumes. Hit the fumes straight up right into the gas can. Now the whole nozzle of the can is on fire in my hand. And I start panicking, and I just start smacking the nozzle. I'm like trying to get the flame off, and it's not working. It's the dumbest thing in the world. And I at least had enough of a moment where I thought to myself, this is going to blow up in my hand. I got to let go of this gas. So I chucked the gas can, and I am not lying. That thing hit the ground, and the second it hit the ground, it went boom, and it blows up. And gas is now in a 10-foot ring on my lawn, and guess where the whole thing lands in the flame that is getting up to 20 feet tall? Guess where it's at? Right under that tree. I mean, like feet away from the front of that tree house. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, I'm going to burn down my tree house. I'm going to burn down the neighborhood. What do I do? So I run over to get the hose, come back with the hose, squeeze the hose, nothing. Spring. Remember, I haven't gone into the basement to turn the dumb hose on yet. So there's no water. So I'm like, ah. So I go over, I grab a shovel, and I just start throwing dirt on it. I'm digging up dirt. I'm like, dirt will put it out. Well, the can has melted down to a bowl. And so now as I'm throwing dirt, it's just landing in the bowl of gas, shoving more gas out of the bowl onto the lawn, catching more of my lawn on fire. And it's just spreading the gas. So I'm like, oh my God. And my wife comes to the door. She's like, what are you doing? My son, in the meantime, is running around the backyard. He's like, ah, ah. I'm like, not helpful, dude. Just sit down. Nicole's at the door. She's screaming. She's like, what is going on? I'm like, it's just a fire. It's fine. Go get the fire extinguisher. She comes back with the fire extinguisher. I pull the pin. Nothing. It's expired by like 25 years. I'm like, what in the world? So now my neighbor across from us, we share a fence line. Hey, oh, good old Fred. I see Fred look at me. He's like, huh. So Fred runs and he grabs a hose and he wobbles back and he goes to climb my fence. It's a chain link fence. I'm like, Fred, what are you doing? You have a hard time walking. And I'm not saying this to him. I'm thinking he starts climbing over and he gets a foot over. And then I'm kidding you not, he slips. Boom. He's like, oh, and then he goes, ah, and he falls off the fence. I'm like, what? But I noticed his hose was working. So I ran over. I was like, thanks, Fred. I grabbed his hose. I'm like, pop. Well, all the water did was what the dirt did. It just shoved more gas out of the bowl, and it's continuing to spread. So Nicole comes back to the door. She's like, what do you want me to do? Should I call the fire department? I'm like, do not call the fire department. No fire department. She says, well, what do I do? I go, I don't know. Google how to put out a gas fire. She says, what? I go, just Google it. And so it's getting bigger. It's getting closer to the treehouse. It's not going out. Tobin's still running circles in a panic, and all of a sudden I hear a fire truck. I'm like, she called the fire department. No. Fred's wife called the fire department. Fred's wife is like, this guy is a moron. He's going to kill all of us. So the fire department rolls up, whole truck. I mean, lights blazing, full truck, all the guys in gear. 3 guys come running into the backyard like my house was on fire. He walks in the backyard, I kid you not, with the hose from the truck, and he goes, oh. And he walks out, and he comes back with a fire extinguisher, and he goes, done. I was like, wow, what? And I looked at him and I go, you got to see this all the time, right? And he goes, yeah, more often than you would think, but you're the first one this year. And I was like, thank you. That's great. Why do I tell you that story? I have had many, many moments in my life like that moment that has left me walking away with the same kind of thought and the same kind of feeling. And the thought and the feeling is this: I am such a moron. Like, what is my problem? And just feeling stupid, feeling like a moron, feeling like I'm exposed, feeling like I couldn't solve a simple problem, and just feeling like a mistake. Not that I made one, but like I am one. And what what I tell you that for is because what's interesting to me and more than ironic is that in the moment that God chooses to make his first, most personable revelation of who he is, and he does so through fire and flame, is that it is in that same moment, in that same revelation, through that same fire and flame, that he begins to recreate the identity of an 80-year-old man named Moses. A man who at that point in his life had resolved himself to the fact that he as well was nothing more than a mistake and a problem. Not had made one, but was one. And had thought that that's probably at this point in his life at 80 years old as good as it was going to get for him. So I want to look at this moment and the dialogue between God and Moses, but I want to go back, and many of you know what the origin of his story was 40 years earlier that led him to this point. But I want to go back and look at it in the book of Exodus chapter 2, when Moses was 40 years old. It says here, verse 11, one day after Moses had grown up, and when he went out to where his people were, he watched over them in their hard labor. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. And so looking this way and looking that way and seeing that no one was there, he killed the Egyptian and he hid him in the sand. I always wondered when I read this for years if that was just purely a crime of passion. You know, case closed, second-degree murder. Like in the moment, he just snapped, killed the guy. But generations later, the Apostle Paul would write to us a little bit of a different understanding. As we go to the book of Acts on your screen, this is what we read. A little bit more insight. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. The next day, Moses came upon two Israelites who were fighting, and he tried to reconcile them, saying, "Men, you're brothers. Why do you want to hurt each other?" But the man who was mistreating the other pushed Moses aside and said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" And he didn't know anybody saw. And when Moses heard this, he fled to Midian. So this is the origin of what happened to Moses. It sent him to where he's at right now, tending sheep for a guy that becomes his father-in-law in Midian, is that he thought he was doing the right thing. You know, the only thing worse than feeling like you screw something up is feeling like you actually thought you were doing the right thing and it ended up being the wrong thing. And the only one who can fix those moments in the way that they penetrate in to telling us who we are and to shaping our identity is to go back to the one who first formed us and created us, whose identity can redeem and transform our identity. So you go back to Genesis, or man, I got to stop saying Genesis. I know my Bible, I promise. Go back to Exodus chapter 3 again. We're going to start in verse 5 where we left off. "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." And then he said to Moses, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And at this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And then the Lord said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt, and I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. And so I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land and into a good and a spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivitites, and the Jebusites. And now the cry of Israel has reached me, and I have seen the way that the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I?" Everybody say, "Who am I?" This is important. He says, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" It's a fair question when you consider a couple of factors right now. Number one, he's talking to God. This is not a conversation he's had before with this person. I mean, this is the God of God, Moses, like you, me. So, I mean, it's a fair question given the fact that you realize he's, number one, he's having a conversation with the God of creation. Number two, in that conversation, God is about to send him back to the place of his worst mistake. He hadn't been there for 40 years now. And when he left, he ran, he hid. Probably his greatest regret. And God's about to send him right back to where his worst mistake happened. And not just send him back to where his worst mistake happened. Number three, he's sending him on a mission to go pick a fight with the most powerful empire of the day. So it's a fair question. You got me, I think you got the wrong guy. Who am I to be the one to go back? And right away in the early part of the Bible, in this story is introduced what will become two of, I think, the most important questions in all of humanity. Moses just asked the first, who am I? And it doesn't matter what you add on to that afterwards. Who am I that this should have happened to me? Who am I that I don't have? Who am I that whatever. It doesn't matter how you finish it. Who am I is one of the greatest pursuits of every human being. And one of the reasons why so many people end up in such broken places is because we don't know how to answer that question. One of the most important questions in all of humanity is who am I? And knowing how to answer it and where to go to get the answer. But this passage also will introduce what I believe to be the second most important question, which I don't think is second most in relation to. I think it's the primary question, but it is the second in the passage. Go back to the text, Exodus. Moses says, but who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Verse 12, and God said, I will be with you. This will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Now, the question's about to follow, the second question. But before I get there, I just want to point out, because I think this is important. In response to Moses' question of identity born out of insecurity, who am I? Recognize that God doesn't answer with description. He answers with presence. God doesn't answer back and go, oh, Moses, here's who you are. You're the man. I'm picking you. I'm God. I get to pick my A-team. He doesn't say, oh, Moses, here's who you are, and account his maybe training in the Egyptian empire or go back to the skill he has. He doesn't bolster up his ego. He doesn't remind him in this moment that he's a part of a nation of people whose history has waited for the redemption of God, for the Messiah to still come. There's a lot of ways that God could have answered that question back to Moses to affirm who Moses is, to solidify some of what's been true about him in his past. He doesn't go at all to description. He goes to presence. In other words, he doesn't say, Moses, this is who you are. He says, Moses, I'm going to be with you. Moses goes, who am I? God's response was, I'll be with you. I'm going to go with you. And here's why that's important. In a world that is absolutely addicted to defining our personality, to figuring out who we are, to projecting it to the rest of the world through our jobs, through our accomplishments, through social media, whatever it is, here's what I think we're starting to see right off the bat from the early days of the scriptures being recorded. There is no true defining of yourself apart from the self of God. If you attempt to understand who you are, and you attempt the great exploration of who am I, devoid and divorced from first and foremost trying to ask the question, who is God, you will end up at the wrong conclusion every time. And that's why, even for those of you who are parents right now, you know, we were just talking about some of the funniness of being parents in the back room a minute ago on our kids at different ages. You know, mine are 19 and 22. And so we're a little bit beyond the days where we're, you know, everybody's living at home and we're heavily involved in forming their identity and helping them understand who they are. But I will tell you this, those of you that are still there, your kids, this is part of where we're at as human beings, especially the younger we are. Like these are the early stages we start trying to figure out who am I, and we're absorbing that information from the people and the places around us. Do you know that you as a parent, your number one job in helping your kids figure out who they are is to help them understand who Jesus is? Not, and then who they are. No. Just who Jesus is. And then he'll help them understand who they are. Some of us, even right now as adults, we are still running from thing to thing to thing to person to thing to event to accomplishment to stuff to acquire to you fill in the blank to trying to figure out who we are and tell the rest of the world who we are, because the pursuit of our identity has taken preeminence over the pursuit of God's identity. Second question. Moses said to God, okay, but suppose I go back to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what's his name? Well, then what shall I say to them? First of all, Moses cracks me up. You're talking to God. You just shut up, nod your head and say, okay, and then do what you're told to do. That's what I think. And then the truth is I look at my own life. I'm like, oh yeah, then there's me. Because I do this too. I have a tendency to want to argue back, question. God says something. I have a strong impression that it's him. I'm like, yeah, but do I need to or should I? But today, how about tomorrow? Moses is being as human as you and I are. But in the exchange back and forth is a presentation of the two most important questions, I think, in all of humanity. Number one, who am I? Number two, who is God? And that's Moses' question. Who do I tell him sent me? What he's really asking is, who are you? Now, the problem with those two questions is that that's usually the order we try to answer them. Who am I? Who is God? When you attempt to answer those two questions in that order, it will always lead you to the wrong conclusion about both. And here's why. You and I don't get to define who we are. God does, because he made us. And if you want to know who you are, truly your identity, your form, your purpose, the reason you're here, you have to know his first. Because God's personality, God's identity defines our identity, not the opposite way around. And when we get these questions in the right order, who is God? And that's our prominent question in life. As we explore him more and more, he reveals more and more and more of who he is. And as he does, guess what else he reveals? Who you are. He begins to reveal who you are as well. Because who you are is tied to and connected to who he is. If he really is who he says he is the creator of all things, that he knit you together in your mother's womb. You're not random. You didn't just pop up one day, you're like, oh, I didn't see that guy coming. Like he knew, he dreamed you into existence. Then who you are made to be in the truest sense of your identity is attached to who he is. And you cannot separate the two. This is why I think one of the reasons A.W. Tozer once said this on your screen. He said, what we think of when we think about God and what comes into our minds when we think about him is the most important thing about us. What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Why? Because what you come to understand about the identity, the nature, and the character of God doesn't just unveil to you who he is, it begins to then unveil to you who you are. You see, they're totally connected. The more you begin to understand him, the more he reveals who he is to you, and you pursue understanding him, the more he begins to reveal to you who you are as well. And so Moses asks a very direct and poignant question. Okay, but who do I tell the people sent me? Like, what is your name? And so God gives a very direct answer to that question. Go back to the text. And God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. And God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, that God has sent me to you. And this is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. So go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob appeared to me and said, I have watched over you, and I have seen you, and I have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into a different land, a land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivitites, and the Jebusites, and it will be a land flowing with milk and honey. The Hebrew phrase here, I am, that God uses, is the phrase, Ahyeh, Eshir, Ahyeh. And it literally becomes the root foundation of what the Israelite people would most refer to God in the generations to come, as Yahweh. And one of the important things about this is God didn't remain at this point any longer just the generic sense of God. The word there in Hebrew would be Elohim, where he's just the God of creation, but distant and removed. When he says, I am that I am, what he's saying is, I am far more personal than you realize. I don't want to be the God who's out here. I want to be the God who's right here with you. He's presenting himself as a God with a name that we can call on him by. He's presenting himself as the God who says, I am with you so that you can rest in my presence. The God who also says, I'm the God who redeems your past, who ignites your present, and who mobilizes you into your future. Like, I have plans for you, an identity for you that only comes out of you pursuing me and knowing who I am. Because this is exactly what he does with Moses. He takes Moses and he shapes him and reshapes him and then sends him into this whole new identity and calling that he has for him, all of which is born out of Moses getting more revelation of who God is. And so to the question of our study this last week and even today, who is God? Part of the answer that we get out of the book of Exodus is, I am the God who is both above you, Elohim, but I am also the God who is with you and present to you, I am that I am. I am the God who, in being present to you, I reveal myself to you, and then I invite you to respond to those revelations. And God could have been just one or the other. And there are religious beliefs that fall into one or the other camp. Like there are religious beliefs that there is just a God who has revealed himself to creation, but he's not personable, he's not knowable. And there are other ideas that God is us. There is a knowableness, but he's not above us. He's not the God of creation, that there's no revelation to be made because you're God. So he could have been a God of one or the other. He could have been a God, even the true God, even this God here that we read about, Jesus Christ. He could have been a God that said, I'll reveal myself to you. I am God of creation. I'm going to go hang out in heaven. Good luck. But he said, no, I'm with you. I'm here with, and he could have also been a God that said, hey, you know what? I'm with you. Well, who are you? It's not for you to know. But he continually reveals more and more of his. You realize Jesus doesn't have to reveal to you and I who he is. As you walk with him any length of time, you've learned more about him, yes? You've experienced more of him, yes? He didn't have to do that. He could have just said, just believe in me, call it done. When you get to heaven, I'll show you more, I'll tell you more. But he is the God who reveals and then says, now respond to what I'm revealing. And you see this with Moses. You go back to the beginning of the whole account. You got the burning bush. That's a revelation. God saying, hey, I'm not just out here. I'm right here. I'm present. I'm supernatural. I do things that are beyond the physics of this world. That is a revelation, a part of his power. And Moses responds to that revelation. What did he do? He went and checked it out. Very simple. But that's what revelation and response usually is. God reveals. We take that small response towards what he revealed. And it continues to go on because you've got God through the bush. He says, Moses, Moses. He's revealing something. What's he revealing? That I know you, that I'm personable, that I'm not absent from you. I'm not unaware of you. He's revealing something about his nature, his affection, his personableness. There's a revelation in just the fact that he called Moses by name. And what's Moses do? He responds. How? He says, here I am. You go, well, that's the natural response to God saying someone's name. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. It's revelation, then response. Then Moses gets there and God says, the place you're standing is holy ground. There's a revelation, again, that I am the God of creation. So anywhere and everywhere I go and I touch becomes a holy, sacred moment. He's revealing something about himself. And what's Moses do? He responds. How? Takes off his sandals. And it keeps going back and forth all the way through the account. There's revelation, there's response. There's revelation, there's response. Finally, God says, here's the revelation. I'm going to send you back to Egypt. The revelation here is, I listen to my people. I've heard their cries. I'm not detached from their emotion and their pain. I actually want to help and move into what he's revealing part of what makes him God and who he is. Up to this point, did the people think God had abandoned them? Yeah. They did not think he was the God who had been listening to their cries. They did not think he was the God who was going to rescue them. What he's revealing in this moment by saying, Moses, I'm going to send you back, is I am the God who listens. I am the God who responds. I am the God whose heart feels the weariness and the heaviness and the burdens that your hearts feel. That's his revelation. And Moses responded when God said, go. He did what? He went. He went. This is why it's so important. If we're going to know who God is, the first thing we've got to be committed to do is to know who God truly is. Like who the real version of God is. Because listen, from our personalities to our religious upbringings to the influence of podcasters or books that we read or people that we know that don't believe, and all these different inputs of ideas and thoughts, you and I aren't all that different from Leonard Sweet. We've got our beliefs, but some of them have to be wrong. And if we're not careful, what we can do is we can create not just a 20% wrong in what we believe, we could create a 60, 70, 80, 90% wrong in what we believe. Our pursuit, if we want to know who God is to be determined and committed to say, but I don't want to know a version of him, I want to know the true version of him. I don't want to know a distorted idea of who God is, I want to know the pure idea of who God is. I don't want to know a manufactured or a counterfeit version, I want to know the absolute true version. But here's the reality. Oftentimes, as God continues to reveal himself to us, you'll realize, and some of you have experienced this more than once, there are moments that he's not the God you want him to be. But he'll always be the God you need him to be. Not always the God you want him to be. Which is why you want to know who God is. You've got to be determined and committed to know who the real true God is and to filter out any voice, any idea, any concept that gives you a counterfeit to any degree version of who he is. I have a song recently and an artist that I just learned of, I think in the last couple of weeks, that's really been helping this point make sense for me. And this might be a little bit weird, but I actually want to show you a clip of a song that kind of got me into this guy. So for just a couple seconds, I want you to listen to this clip. This guy named Solomon and this song that he sings here on your screen. Well, it won't be on your screen, I guess, but it'll be in your ears.
Lord, I'm tired from all this stressing. Too weak to count my blessings. Ain't got time for window dressing. Just trying to keep my soul intact. I've been running hard, feet on fire.
That's good, isn't it? Some of you are like, I don't get how those lyrics make the point you're trying to make. The lyrics don't. The guy singing it does. You know how? He ain't real. That's 100% AI. I know, that's what I said. I found that guy a couple weeks ago. I came in on a Sunday morning. I was in the back room with Jeremy and Moses. I was like, you guys, you got to listen to this new guy I found. He's so good, man. We got to do one of his songs. And I pull him up, and Jeremy starts laughing. And I go, I know, I'm probably late to the party. Yeah, he's probably been around for a long time, and you already knew about him. He goes, no. He's not real. I'm like, what? Yeah, he's not real, man. This guy's so good. He's like, no, he's AI. Like, he's not a human being at all. Like, I go, no, he's got a picture on Spotify. He's got a picture. He goes, that's a fake picture, dude. It's not real. I was like, but he sings amazing. He's like, yeah, it's all computers. It's not real. So my wife, who's worked for Ford before in some AI projects, I sent it right to her. I was like, hey, is this real? And she right away, she's like, honey, that's AI. I was like, what? And here's the thing. Some of us have parts of God that we have fallen in love with that aren't him. They're a manufactured AI version of him. If you really want to know who God is, this is going to sound simple, but it's profound, I think. You have to let God himself define himself. You and I don't get the right and the privilege to define who God is. He's already done that. He's already defined who he is. And then he begins to define who we are. And there's a personableness in how he will tell each and every one of you what he's made you for. But there is also a general reality of after he has defined himself, how he defines all of us. It's a concept that we call the imago Dei, that every single one of us are made in his image. You want to know what it means to be you, you need to know what it means to be him, because you're made in his image. The problem is there's parts of his image we don't tend to like, and so we want to change. And that's why a lot of times in the church world, and I've fallen victim to doing this as well, maybe some of you, maybe you're in this place right now, will say things like, well, I don't think if God really loved me, he would, fill in the blank. I don't like that God does. I don't like that God did. I don't like that the Bible says God does, fill in the blank. And so we'll start to amend and adjust and pick and choose. And this would be as ridiculous as if my son came to me at some point while he was growing up and he's like, hey, Dad, I want to have a talk. All right, let's talk. You know, I've been thinking a lot. While I appreciate you, there are a lot of things about you that I think need to change. Like, oh, yeah, like, for example, mountain biking. I don't really want a dad that likes to mountain bike. I think you're a figure skater. Like, nope, mountain biker. No, you're a figure skater, Dad. And while we're at it, you've got this midnight rule, this curfew for me. I think if you really loved me, you wouldn't want to hamper the relationships that could happen beyond midnight with my friends. So I actually think that because I think you love me, you really don't have a midnight curfew. It's kind of come home whenever I want, just make wise choices. And he could go through the line and start to amend and adjust all these things about me so that by the time he's done, it's not even me anymore. It's somebody else that he's calling Dad. And you and I could do the same thing with God. If we're not careful, we can create a version of God and even begin to feel affection for and worship a version of God that's not in fact God. That's become this distorted, counterfeit version because we start to amend and adjust, because we haven't allowed God himself to define himself. And instead of the imago Dei, us being made in his image, we kind of reverse it and we do what I would call the imago man, is we start to create God in our image. And when we do that, and when our pursuit is mostly in life about figuring out who we are more than figuring out who God is, forming our identity than understanding his identity, what we start to do is attach ourselves to these little subcultures of identity around us. These ways that other people, other communities, other groups then create who we are, that ultimately create the ways that we think God is. For example, you go back to the other side of the state, the Detroit area, there are just ways in the Metro Detroit area that we defined ourselves, that we want to think of ourselves. Gritty, tough. To be honest, probably most Detroiters wouldn't tell you this, but we love the fact that people are intimidated by Detroit. It's weird. I'm just being honest. There's something about the Metro Detroit area that we love. Part of our image is that we intimidate people. That's why it doesn't matter where you live on the other side of the state. If you ask somebody where you're from, they'll say, Detroit. This happens all the time. Like, bro, you live in bougie Birmingham Hill. You're not from Detroit. But we want to attach ourselves to the gritty, intimidating Detroit. Same here on West Side, right? Holland area. If we were to think about some of the things that become our persona and our identity that we attach to here, might be things like hardworking, successful, not Detroit. How about Dutch? I remember early on when I got here, somebody was explaining to me the concept of Dutch bingo, and I go, oh, I literally feel like I don't belong here because I'm not related to anybody Dutch. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, somewhere in your family, you're related to the Dutch. And so I laughed and I said, oh, you probably think God's Dutch. And straight face, he looks at me and goes, God is Dutch. He's like, okay, all right. Go a little south of us in Saugatuck. And that identity is framed mostly around sexuality. And then we have just the parts of our lives, the things we've done, the things that have been done to us, the things we have, where our I am statement isn't I am his, I am made in his image. It is I am what I have, I am where I live, I am what I've done, I am my 401k, I am what my kids do, I am where my kids go to school, I am what I drive, I am my zip code. And we start forming all these different pockets of identity for ourselves. And you know what we do when we do that? Is we begin to project them up onto God. And God then, ironically, starts to look a lot more like us than we look like him. And instead of living our lives with this idea that I am who he is, and so if I want to understand who I am, I need to understand more and more who he is. Instead, we actually rob God of his initial statement to Moses. No, I am who I am. I am what I am. I define myself. I set who I am. And then ironically, if your lead in life is, I am what I am. Nobody tells me who I am. I tell me who I am. Is that we start to go, and he is like I am. And we start forming God more into our image and likeness instead of letting him form us into his image and likeness. Listen, the simple line and the simple reality is this: understanding who we are, you want to know who you are, begins with understanding who God is. Understanding who you are begins with and never ends with the pursuit of understanding who God is. And the more you pursue him, you spend a lifetime pursuing him, he's going to, like with Moses, he's going to reveal more and more and more and more of who he is to you. And every time he reveals something, our job is to respond to what he reveals. He reveals, we respond. He reveals, we respond. Or say it this way: every time God shows you a new layer of who he is, you accept it and receive it. Even if you don't like it. Even if you're like, I don't understand why you would be that way. Well, God himself gets to define himself. And when he shares another layer with you of who he is, you receive it, you accept it, and then you do what he tells you to do. Because his revelation is seldom without being accompanied by instruction. Here's what I want you to do. Here's who I made you to be. Here's where I want you to go. He reveals, we respond, we obey. And the more you do that, the more you will not only understand who God is, the more he will teach you in that place who you are. You don't have to pursue who you are. He already knows. You pursue who he is, and he'll tell you who you are. And then he begins to transform everything. Where I am what I do, it becomes, no, he's what I do. Where I am what I own becomes he's what I own. Where I am my past mistakes becomes he's my grace and forgiveness, my past, present, future. Where I am who I sleep with becomes, no, he's my deepest experience of love and even pleasure. Where I am who my kids are becomes, nope, he is my truest family. Where I am my ethnic culture becomes, no, he's my defining culture. Where I am where I live becomes, no, he's my home. Where I am, my mistakes that I've made and the insecurity that's come from them are, no, he is my strength, he is my security, he is my identity. What the book of Exodus shows us in this burning bush moment is not just the supernatural ability of God to communicate to Moses all those years ago. It shows us that today our identity is anchored in the one who made us. It's anchored in God. The one who is consistent and constant, who is above us and yet present to us, who is the creator and yet he is personable. And so we don't have to spend our lives exhausting ourselves trying to figure out who we are. What we do is we spend our lives trying to figure out who he is. And as we do, he teaches us who we are. God, I pray that things I have felt even all week long, the desire and the longing to continue to grow in myself, and in some ways the inability to communicate the vastness of you, who you are, and what it means to know you, to then know ourselves. Would you come in, God? Whatever today from me was maybe just a fish in a loaf, would you take it and multiply it to an immeasurable amount that would feed all of us with the truth of who you are, to the end of knowing more also who we are and how to love you back. And so God, do what I can't do with your words, your truths, in Jesus' name, that we would know you. Amen.
I want to know you. I want to know you. I want to know you for who you really are. I want to know you. I want to know you. When I'm faithless, you are faithful. Yeah, you really are. When I'm faithless, you are faithful. When I'm faithless, when I'm faithless, you are faithful. Yes, you are, Jesus. Yeah, you really are. When I'm faithless, you are faithful. You are turning all things for my
Worship with these words, church. You are turning.
You are turning all things for my good. Yeah, you really are. You are turning all things for my good. Yeah, you really are. You are turning all things for my good.
Surrender to this.
In my weakness, in my weakness, you are able. In my weakness, you are able. Yeah, you really are. In my weakness, you are able. Yeah, you really are. In my weakness, you are able. Yeah, you really are.
You guys are awesome. Years ago, I got in a bad habit. When I would leave on a Sunday morning from church, I would go right to my car and I'd pull up Facebook. And I'd want to see what people were saying. Want to see what comments they made on the message, what thoughts they had. And I knew what I was doing is I was value farming from the comments on Facebook to tell me who I was. And it's one of the reasons why I got in a different habit a while ago, even deleted it off my phone, and will get in the car instead now after a day like this, because especially on days like this for me, I feel super vulnerable. I am more of an introvert, so getting up here doing this, I walk off, I feel a little exposed. So that's why I think I had a tendency to go, somebody affirm me, somebody tell me who I am, somebody tell me I did good. And so now I'm like, And I'll go and get in my car for a few minutes before I get home today. And what I started doing was, okay, God, tell me, let me hear from you what you think of today. And God even shifted that over time. And eventually started telling me, don't come to me to ask me to tell you about yourself. Just come and tell me what you think about me. And I'll just sit there in the car. I'll do it today before I get home. And I will just celebrate Jesus and worship him and thank him. And he does something in that place to create a deep sense of who he's made me to be that I never found in 1,000 comments. So I hope and pray that you'll go into this week and you'll look for the places where maybe you have tried to let somebody else tell you who you are. And instead, you will direct that energy to knowing more who he is, confident that as you pursue him, he'll tell you who you are. So go this week and know that there's a God, his name is Jesus, and he is wildly passionate about you, and he knows who you're meant to be. Pursue him. We'll see you next Sunday.